Okay.
Okay. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for being here in our gallery and online. Today, we are having a seminar on Jeremy Morgan's art, and we unfortunately to be joined by several experts, and they are going to talk about Jeremy's art from different perspectives, maybe from the color blue to maybe culture, context, and philosophy, maybe. So first, we are gonna welcome uh, Professor Carl Nagin. Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Um, First of all, I want to thank Jianhua for sponsoring these wonderful discussions and encounters, East and West, with the interest in trying to understand, develop some transcultural, transnational meeting points, East and West, Chinese art and Western art. And of course, today we have this beautiful exhibition of Jeremy's work. Jeremy, this exhibit was for me very illuminating. So when I saw Jeremy's work, it made me think about and consider color in an entirely new way. These paintings taught me to see color in an entirely new way. And I want to explore that with you a little bit, because I'm still trying in some ways to understand, even though I've had the wonderful honor of visiting Jeremy's studio a couple times and having long discussions with him. And he gave this beautifully articulate history of Western art last week. I'm still trying to puzzle out for myself what it is that I find so distinctive about his painting. And it has something to do with color, with his use of color. That's the first thing that struck me. And the luminosity of his color, the way in which he uses, as he self-defines himself, as a landscape painter, the way he uses color in the context of creating landscapes, but also with the vocabulary of Western abstractionism on the one hand, abstract expressionism and its traditions, its vocabulary, its elements, but also because Jeremy has the distinction of being one of the first Western abstract painters, landscape painters, to teach in China, to teach abstract painting to Chinese students at Chinese academies. And that's a wonderful example of kind of transnational, transcultural exchange, which I think is, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, Jianhua, but I think that's one of the purposes of this gallery. And it's part of Jianhua's, his mission. And I hope I can contribute to that a little bit in my exploration of Jeremy's, my attempt to understand color in a new way. I think that for me, artists teach me how to see in new ways. And I want to explore that with you. And I'd like to ask you all, we're going to just take a couple minutes here to do this. I want you to write down, and this is an exercise that's developed from a surrealist game that was developed in France in the 1930s and 40s called The Exquisite Corpse, kind of forbidding name, but it was a game in which basically a group of surrealist artists and painters would and writers would pass around a piece of paper and generate automatic subconscious associations with something, whatever it was, the topic was. And I'm going to ask you to do that now with the color blue. I want you to just automatically write down any associations you have with the color blue. Could be a piece of music, huh? Could be a painting. It could be a phrase out of the blue. I'm feeling blue, the blues, all these associations that we have that are part of the cultural construction of color, part of the vocabulary of color that we all have. There are no right or wrong answers here. So let's just take a moment. First of all, everybody close your eyes and focus on your breathing. Just breathe in and breathe out. Feel the movement of your breath going through your nostrils, down to your stomach, filling your stomach, your solar plexus. Let your stomach just release that breath. Take a minute or two to do that. Just focus on your breathing without even thinking about the color blue or about anything. Just you focus on your breathing for a moment or two. And then when I tell you to, open your eyes and start writing anything that comes to your mind with the color blue. One more breath, and then start to write. Go. Blue. Tangled up in blue. Don't think about it too hard. Just anything that pops into your mind. An image, a sound, a phrase. Take another minute. Try to get down at least 10 phrases, ideas, images of blue in your list. Don't overthink it. Just automatic. Let your subconscious speak to you. And perhaps even during my talk, if something occurs to you, add it to your list. So a long time ago in 1929, a surrealist poet by the name of Paul Éluard wrote a poem based on this kind of writing called La Terre est bleue. The earth is blue. That's easy to understand. Nothing complicated or surrealistic about that. This blue dot that we've seen from the moon floating in black space, blue and white, right? But the last line of the poem, curiously, says this: the earth blue as an orange. Blue as an orange. Why would somebody say that blue is orange? What's he hinting at here? What's he suggesting? What associations with blue and orange might be in his mind? We'll come back to that a little later, but that's a line of poetry that became very famous in the surrealist movement, and I think has some import in what I'm going to talk about today. Color is fundamental to our experience, how we see and interpret the world. Color is also a matter of definition, of language and culture. And that turns out to be both highly subjective, it has a highly subjective dimension, personal, imaginative, emotional, and cultural, as well as an objective dimension, how color actually functions from a scientific point of view, from the science of optics, ophthalmology, what the structure of the eye teaches us about seeing and vision. On the one hand, the science of how eyes receive and process light and dark, as understood by the science of vision, optics, ophthalmology, but also its subjective, psychological, cultural dimensions. Color is very much a matter of language, how we name, classify, define, interpret the spectrum of visible light waves, turns out to be vitally subjective. And nothing in my mind illuminates this more than the use and associations across cultures and time of the color blue. Whether, think for a moment of the murals of Buddhist paradise in China's caves of the Thousand Buddhas, which go back before the Tang Dynasty, Northern Wei Dynasty, the colors of the Buddha, the blue-green backgrounds of Buddhist paradise, the halo of the Buddha is a rainbow, an aura, and one of those stripes is the color blue. Why? Why? Why is that? Think about that for a moment. But also in contemporary times, the splash color Pomo Fa of Zhang Daqian, his last painting of Mount Lushan, right, where he did this very innovative phase of his painting when, which was certainly influenced by, even though he tried to root it as an ancient Chinese, as part of an ancient Chinese tradition of blue-green paintings dating back to Dunhuang, because he spent many years in Dunhuang copying the murals. His paintings, when he went to Switzerland and he saw these white snow-capped peaks and the deep blue of Lake Geneva, of Lac Léman, he traveled there many, many times. He loved the Swiss landscapes. And it altered, actually, those landscapes altered his approach to painting, as well as the influence of seeing European modernism through the paintings of Matisse, his very first exhibit in Paris at the Musée d'Art Moderne of his own work, right next to an exhibit of Matisse. Well, interesting. So he saw in Matisse's work, as well as in the work of other European modernists, André Masson, the German expressionist, the German abstract expressionist Hubert Berke, and also, of course, Picasso's use of color. He saw a new way of using color. And he learned from that. He tried to absorb that within his own tradition, borrow from that, appropriate that, and created these incredible landscapes, of which the final painting he did, Mount Lushan, a painting of a mountain he never actually saw. One of the only places, sacred mountains in China, that he never visited. So it was a landscape of the mind, an imaginary landscape, with all of the deep associations with Buddhism, Taoism, historically in the 20th century, the encounters between the nationalist and communist forces in Lushan during the anti-Japanese war, when Chiang Kai-shek and Zhou Enlai met at Mount Lushan to form a united front against the Japanese. All of these historical associations, perhaps the most interesting of which for Zhang Daqian is that Mount Lushan is the burial place of the author of Peach Blossom Spring, the essay Peach Blossom Spring, the Chinese Shangri-La and paradise. All of those allusions built into the framework of his longing to go back to a homeland he could never return to, because Zhang's experience is as an overseas Chinese in the West, divided from his homeland, longing to go back, but for political reasons, because of his association and the patronage of the nationalist Chinese, he could not realize. It was a very poignant painting. And remember, he's half blind when he made that painting. He had to be held up. It was an enormous painting. It's 32 feet long. You know, it could imagine that painting on one of these walls, an enormous landscape. And he's using this kind of splash color technique. Very interesting. So there's this use of the deep blues in that painting, and greens. But let's think about the use of those colors in the West. In the Middle Ages, deep blue appears in altarpieces, illuminated manuscripts such as this, in stained glass windows. It's part of not the Buddhist, but the Christian theological representation using pure colors of the robes of the Virgin Mary. And you see this in countless paintings. This is an illustration from a beautiful illuminated manuscript, the Très Riche Heures du Duc de Berry, a French noble, brother of the King of France, who was a collector and connoisseur and patron of illuminated manuscripts. I want to remark on one thing about these. When I started looking at the use of this deep blue color and started thinking about, this is kind of interesting. Here's this color, ultramarine, this deep blue, that's used in becomes part of Christian theology and the representation of the Virgin Mary at a time when the cult of the Virgin Mary is spreading throughout Europe. And it made me think about why is this color in both Christian theological, part of Christian theology, part of the use of paintings to tell stories, teach the stories of the life of Christ, right? And in Caves of the Thousand Buddhas, to use paintings to teach stories about the life of the Buddha. That's kind of interesting. The same color, the same deep blue color. What does that tell us? Where does this color come from? First of all, that's an interesting story that I'm going to talk about a little bit today. Where does this deep blue color that is meant in both cases, in Buddhism, East and West, Christian thinking, represents heaven, represents the divine, represents transcendence, represents deep faith. And faith, I think, as we might all agree, is an act of the imagination. We have to use the imagination to have faith in things about our life, about experience, okay? So I want to chart that, but I just want you to note something. It's often said, and I think this is really a misconception, that one of the great differences between art of China, the long tradition of Chinese painting, and the long tradition of European painting is that in China, text and image are wedded. Calligraphy, painting, poetry, the three perfections, right? There's this marriage of the three in Chinese art. That's certainly true. Perhaps it kind of ends or is less important in 20th century art when China tries to absorb modernist traditions, Chinese painters start using oil painting. Text is less important after the 20th century. But for many centuries, this long, continuous tradition of Chinese painting and calligraphy, text and image, writing text on a painting. Zhang Dachen's Lu Shantu has a text at the top of the mountain that he wrote. Well, that's certainly a defining feature, and the relationship of Chinese brushwork, calligraphy, and the complex history of calligraphy and how that influences Chinese painting. So important. But it's also true, people say, in the West, those things are divided. Look at this. Look at the integration of text and image and graphic marks and the kind of exquisite calligraphy that characterizes this kind of painting. Let's see if I have another one. Ooh, it's not. Let's try again. Well, not this one. We'll get back to that in a little bit. Here's another illuminated manuscript with, let's see, I believe this is the birth of Christ, the scene of the birth of Christ. And again, note the color, the juxtaposition of white, blue, and gold. White, blue, and gold. I'll stop for a moment and return to a question I asked earlier. Where does this blue color come from? Anybody know? This deep ultramarine. This color, this pigment in Europe becomes more valuable than gold more expensive than gold. Why? Because this color is derived from a stone, from a mine, from a rock, lapis lazuli, which is the purest, the most pure lapis lazuli is found in only one place in Afghanistan. There are other mines of it elsewhere in the world, but Afghanistan, about 400 miles northeast of Bamiyan. You all know of the Bamiyan statues of the Buddha carved into the rock that were unfortunately blown up by the Taliban. In the year 600, a Chinese monk traveling to India to get sacred sutras to bring back to China, actually bring back to the caves of the Thousand Buddhas, where he translates them into Chinese, the Diamond Sutra, the Heart Sutra, right? With its famous line, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, that becomes the basis of so much of Buddhist, Chan Buddhist thinking, right? He takes a little detour and he goes to Bamiyan. And what does he see in Bamiyan? He sees that one of those colossal Buddhas is painted in ultramarine. Those Buddhas were originally painted. One was red and one was blue. And the blue came from a mine about 400 miles north of Bamiyan, Bamiyan is really the place, it's a transnational, transcultural spot. Alexander the Great went there. Buddhism enters China and Central Asia, Tajikistan, all of the stans through Bamiyan. It's a center. There are caves there, as there were in Dunhuang, in which there are images of the Buddha, again, painted the halo with ultramarine. The Buddha's statue itself, painted ultramarine, and it comes from this rock. It's a mineral-based pigment that has calcite in it, a white calcite, right? Color white, right? It has azurite, which is the blue, the deep blue, and it also has flecks of fool's gold. So you've got these three colors, gold, white, and blue, all from the same mineral, the same precious rock. And this pigment, ultramarine, becomes, as I said, it's more valuable than gold. And it dominates, it becomes a dominant color in the Middle Ages. And all of this iconography of Mary and sometimes of Christ himself. And it also, interestingly, let's see if I can find another. Here's another example. This is a beautiful painting of the visit of the Magi to the three magicians from the wise men from the East. But look at this caravan with animals, donkeys and camels circling down in the back, coming to the forefront. And look at the incredibly ornate costumes of these various wise men and people, like the third one, the one in the middle there, next to the white horse. Again, ultramarine, these deep blues that are now being woven into textiles, into tapestries, into the garb of the aristocracy, right? So blue becomes this image of power, but this is also a depiction of the Silk Road. And it's the Silk Road that brings ultramarine, brings lapis lazuli to the West. Venice and Florence become the center places for the production of all of these costumes, the tapestries, the clothing of the nobility of Europe. And it's a very, very expensive pigment dye to weave. Now going back to the caves along the Silk Road, here you see that same color. This is a very early donor painting of the Silk Road, of people, traders along the Silk Road carrying goods. But notice again, this is ultramarine, this blue. And again, blue, gold, white, with some red in the image. No, that's not what I want to see. Let's go back here. Here's another image, and I want to point out something else that's very interesting that's going on in the Middle Ages in Europe. You see the figure seated at the table. This is again from the Book of Hours, the Duc de Berry, and that's the Duc de Berry himself seated at the table. This is one of the images of January, and he's giving gifts for New Year's. And again, the Duc de Berry is a brother of the King of France. You see all of these nobles dressed in ultramarine, the same blue. This was very costly. And let me point out something else about these illuminated manuscripts, that before the invention of printing, that's Gutenberg, 1440. At the end of the Middle Ages, all books were manuscripts, written and illuminated, illustrated by hand. Word and text, calligraphic and graphic art are indissolubly linked at this time in the history of Europe. And you see this in the costumes. Not only does it have a religious connotation, the color blue, it also has a political connotation as well. Notice above this canopy, above the dining table, you see in the red column this blue circle with the gold fleur de lis and the background of ultramarine. That becomes the royal colors of France. So this image, this religious color, now becomes nationalized, politicized. It becomes an emblem of power, of the aristocracy, of the upper classes, and spreads throughout Europe, is used throughout Europe. Very interesting kind of history for me. Now I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit, and I want to jump to the year 1666. 1666 is the year of the Great Plague in Europe. It's also around the time that an apple drops on the head of a famous European polymath and scientist by the name of Isaac Newton. Okay, it's kind of part of the mythography of Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was a really interesting figure, not only in the history of science, but he was also a theologian, and a theologian who said that people who worship images of Christ, he was an Anglican, that's idolatry. We can't do this anymore. We can't have these images of Christ and Virgin Mary. That's worshiping images. We don't want to do that anymore. Also interesting about Sir Isaac Newton, of the many thousands of pages of scientific works that he wrote, roughly a tenth of them were devoted to alchemy. Newton was very interested in alchemy, and he believed that occult energies in the universe from the planets governed our destiny. This scientist, who was the one who not only articulates the laws of gravity, apples falling on his head, eating the forbidden fruit, no, knocking him on the head with the forbidden fruit. He's also the father of the science of optics. What's the impact of his discovery of optics on painting and the history of painting? When we consider the history of painting, we should also consider the history of optics. Well, kind of a parlor trick. One day, Isaac Newton takes a prism, takes a shaft of white sunlight through that prism, and suddenly there appears a rainbow of colors, a spectrum of colors. He takes another prism and takes that same rainbow of colors, passes it through a prism, and it turns to white. That's very interesting. People at that time, Newton did not invent the prism. People thought that this rainbow parlor trick that he created that was the result of imperfections in the glass. Newton showed that that was not the case. Why is that important in the history of painting? Well, You can use a prism, a dispersive prism, to separate white light into its constituent wavelengths. And then you can use another prism to put the rainbow of colors back into white. This is actually a revolutionary idea because it refuted not only our ideas about glass, or then common ideas about glass, but for centuries, the church had taught that our white sunlight was a divine gift. And the idea that could be broken down into a rainbow of colors, that's heresy. That's not possible. Hence the use of all of these pure colors. In fact, it was forbidden in the Middle Ages to fragment pigments. You had to use pure pigments in religious paintings. So this is again a revolutionary idea. Science enters Western painting in a profound way in the 17th century painters. And the problem here, this is actually a problem for artists. Because although optically speaking, what Newton discovered about light is scientifically true, the opposite is true if you're mixing paints. So for instance, if you have a box of watercolors and you start mixing all of these separate rainbow colors, what happens? It doesn't end up being white, it ends up being black. It gets muddy, right? So optically, from a painter's perspective, this is something of a paradox. What do we do with this? What do they do with this? So optically, Newton had discovered he made an important distinction between two types of color mixing, additive and subtractive. That's part of his science of optics. With additive mixing, in his view, different light wavelengths combine to create different colors. When added together, they create white light. Newton proved this bit of color alchemy, because it is a kind of alchemy, this little parlor trick that he does with his prism. Well, he's separating colors. And again, as I said, the opposite is true when paints are mixed. Why is that the case? Because each pigment of color, whether it's blue or red or yellow, any of the prismatic colors, reflects back to the eye a reduced proportion of available light. So when several are mixed together, more and more wavelengths are actually subtracted from what we see. That's what's going on optically with our cones and rods in our eye, right? And if you mix enough pigments together, more and more wavelengths are subtracted. So this amalgam when you're doing this with paint turns out to be black, not white. And I'd ask you, when you go around and look at Jeremy's paintings in this room, consider the alchemy of colors that he's using here. This is a whole language of color that he's developed. And the way in which, turn around back, look at black and white, look at the blue, the black, the white, the yellow in these paintings, and the way the planes of color, the edges of the color mix, contact one another. I think Jeremy's invented a new language of color. He's certainly using and drawing from the vocabulary and the ideas about color that were developed by painters like Kandinsky. Kandinsky, who was very influenced by Theosophy and Annie Besant's teachings about color. Again, in Theosophy, colors, the theosophical system attempted to go back to something almost medieval. Colors had character, had a psychological component in that philosophy. And so there were good colors and bad colors. Colors had character. They were anthropomorphized in a certain way on a spiritual plane, because Besant was very interested in the phenomena of auras, spiritual auras. So here's a painter, Kandinsky, who was influenced by theosophy, right? And he's trying to transmute in an alchemical way some of those ideas into his paintings. And this becomes a very important vocabulary in the history of abstract expressionism in the West. But it has a spiritual basis that people don't talk about much. Jeremy, remind me, what's the title of Kandinsky's book? The Spirit of Art, or the
Really spiritual enough.
Yeah. I mean, here's this man, you know, he's developing a theory of art around the time of World War I, when there is a kind of spiritual crisis in the West, a breakdown of beliefs because of the slaughter that was going on in Europe and the collapse of the Habsburg Empire. And he's doing this at the same time, you know, Vienna, which was a cultural melting pot. It's where Schoenberg develops atonal music. Schoenberg, who studied painting for a while, became a disciple of Kandinsky. Schoenberg, who uses ideas of the Kabbalah in his operas to create a whole numeric alphabet, sacred alphabet. He's drawing from the Kabbalah. Again, this idea of the divine word. Remember these images of Mary. It's very interesting phenomena in a lot of these early medieval paintings of how they represent the divine conception of Christ, the Immaculate Conception. How is that portrayed visually? How do you portray something transcendent, otherworldly? Well, it's done with rays of gold light passing through glass, hitting the breast or other parts of Mary's body. That's one way it's represented in medieval painting. The other way is through her ear. The rays of light go through her ear. Why? Because it's the divine word, the logos. In the beginning was the word. Creation is about the divine word. Creation is a manifestation in the Kabbalah of numbers and letters. The Kabbalah in the Jewish tradition is a way of reading the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. Every word is coded according to a number and sacred vocabulary. Every letter has a value, a numeric value. Every name has a numeric value that reflects a very complex cosmology of transcendence. And these ideas are being revisited around the time of Kandinsky. It's also, of course, the time when theory of relativity is coming on the stage. Heisenberg, the uncertainty principle, all of that concentrated in Vienna, all of that destroyed by the Nazis. So this is a tumultuous time, and it's often in tumultuous times that new ways of seeing are born. Consider Impressionism. When does Impressionism happen? When the Germans invade France, take over the city of Paris. Nadal is up in his balloon, photographing for the first time aerial vision of Paris. The first Impressionist salon takes place in Nadal's studio. Nadal has taught them the impact of photography on Impressionism is huge, not only because it allows painters now to leave behind the realism, the naturalistic tradition, and go to more abstract ideas, or really to begin to paint paintings that are about how we see color. Wonderful image here. Whoops, there. Take a look at this painting. I just saw this painting the other day. I recommend that you all go to see this wonderful exhibit at the Legion of Honor of Manet and Morisot and Berthe Morisot. This is one of the paintings that Manet did. That's his brother-in-law, I think, posing there in white. And again, notice white, blue, and these kind of, I wouldn't call them gold, but sort of sepia, yellowish brown of the boat. Same fundamental colors that we've been dealing with all along. But look what Manet's doing here. When this painting which he submitted to one of the salons, he was criticized. He was just lambasted. First of all, they told him, the academic painters of the salons and the academic experts of his day said, water doesn't look that color. That's not water. Why can't he paint the way water looks? Well, he is painting the way water looks. In fact, he's painting, he understands that water changes color, depending on the light how light is reflected on the surface of water. So this is a new way of seeing. He's reminding us that when we look, that color is something very transitory. It's not fixed as it was in the Middle Ages. The Virgin Mary, that pure blue, that pure lapis lazuli color. I mentioned that Impressionism emerges when the Germans have occupied France. There's another thing going on at the same time, which is the Paris Commune. Bloody uprising of the workers, taking over the city. The armies of Napoleon III are called in to massacre French workers. Manet is a guard. He witnesses this. And yet he's painting these kinds of paintings. These very tranquil, beautiful, this is somebody on a weekend holiday. Manet is called the painter of modern life for good reason, because he's painting scenes like this. Again, something very revolutionary, something very new. But the use of color in Impressionism is so interesting. Look at the white and the way in which the white, the brushstrokes actually reflect the blue on the dress of this woman. Look at the water, the mixture of white and blue. He sees color as light. And he's asking us as witnesses of color, as viewers of color, of paintings, to forget about the subject matter. Look at light. Look at how we see. Look at how you see. One of the distinguishing features of Manet's painting is, of course, the gaze. The gaze of his subjects, the way this sailor is looking at us. Or in his famous painting, his Picnic in the Grass, with a naked woman staring at the viewer and these dressed sort of kind of upper class men around her, or Olympia in her boudoir, this courtesan, the way she looks at us and is asking us, what do you see? What are you looking at? Are you looking at a naked woman, or are you looking at a painting of a naked woman? What are you looking at? What's capturing your eye, really? Paintings are no longer about their content, their story, their narrative. They're about how we see. And the painter is inviting us to see in a new way. Now, painters are always trying to solve problems, like writers. They're working on a two-dimensional surface. They're trying to represent three-dimensional space, space-time continuum, fourth dimension, time. Beginning with Impressionism, painters are looking to develop new ways of seeing. And I think Jeremy's painting does this beautifully because of the impact, not only is he using the vocabulary that's related to abstract expressionism, but he calls them landscape paintings. What kind of landscapes is he painting here? What sort of landscape is this? Well, it's certainly a landscape of color. Very vibrant color, very luminous color. What's going on in these paintings? What is he telling us about painting? Well, he's also trying to represent how the act of painting itself, I think, hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, is a kind of transcendent act. And here he's drawing on Eastern philosophy, Eastern aesthetic ideas, Taoist ideas about creation and the nature of the creative act as an act of imagination. I'm going to stop here for a moment. I'd like to invite Jeremy to maybe say something about that, because I feel like that's something I don't quite know how to articulate, the way in which your immersion and Chinese aesthetic ideas informs your process.
Certainly, very adequately to say the least. That is that I'm learning about the Chinese mind through the writing of Lao Tzu, looking at the art of them. But there's a lot to learn. But what I've always sensed in Chinese art is its acceptance of what I will call precision and ambiguity, pleasure, which is immediately alluring to me, because for me they are clearly landscapes, but they're also much more than that. And any great landscape painting can be a number of elements. But for me, when I saw the Chinese landscapes in comparison to some Western landscapes, they were leaving a lot to the imagination. And why I was drawn to people like realist into impressionism, and certainly into and the work of Turner was his dissolving of the world of physical certainty into atmospheric space and color. And to me, as a non-scholar of these things, an art appreciator is seeing the synthesis from what I see as a Asiatic sensibility in both Monet and the large paintings, the Lawrence paintings, the water lady paintings, and Turner's dissolving universe. Both of them are inspired, in my opinion, to dematerialize the world into essences and energies, which I think is foundational to Chinese painting, which is based on the concept of qi as an animating force. And then the Western world, we tend to fixate on objects and structures. China has a superb set of structures in its own aesthetic, but energy is an informing element that I think constitutes the constituent form of its work. So flowingness, flowing continuum, seemingly undifferentiated or de-differentiated elements. And so painting, my paintings, I refer to them as landscapes because that's what they are in terms of their reception. What they become through the process of painting is both an act of memory, invention, and a kind of inquiry. So the natural world is always my source. My working method is purely improvisational and spontaneous. I decide on sight it, but I want to work on a certain scale, but otherwise it's a process of working, again, mostly monochromatic, getting back to China, and China Qian is the idea, when I saw the lava doing his technique for us in Dr. Xu's other gallery, was the black ink work, if there was added to by colour, was distracting. So there was effectively a skeleton structure, which was very Chinese, but then his use of colour, which by Chinese standards I thought was excessive in a good way, it was pushing the boundaries of what might be tolerable in very exciting ways. And I think that for me, I like to think I'm part of a tradition, both Eastern and Western, but mostly Western by birth, Eastern by inclination. And in fact, I live in the whole world. I occupy part of it, but I like to think of the common humanity. And art is a way that cultures begin to have dialogue. They maintain their distinctness, but also the capacity to exchange. And that's what really interests me. So the natural world, landscape, form, structures, geology, I learned from my father the science aspect of what is a landscape, and then the aesthetic of landscape painting, and then the poetic aspect of landscape painting, and the spiritual dimension of landscape painting, and our relation of the humans to the natural world and to the vastness of the cosmos. And so that's what these are, forms of encounter with ideas are fed by those sorts of feelings.
I'm very struck. One thing I want to return to that you said when you mentioned Zhang Dachen and the skeleton of, in fact, if you read accounts of how he did those last paintings, Lushan included, there's a wonderful account by his student, Sun Yun Sheng, who witnessed and actually tried to learn this technique of splash color, pomo fa, that Zhang Dachen used. Zhang Dachen began with a black ink as the background, a kind of skeletal outline of the mountainous forms of Lushan that he was using. And you can see that. Unfortunately, I was not able to get a good, you can come up and see this after my talk, but this is the Lushan painting. And you can see in the far background, particularly here, that there's black ink, and he builds splash color. And again, this is a 30-foot long painting. It's a massively long. It's a huge painting, and he had to be held up. And he painted this. He's half blind when he was painting this. He had to be held up, and sometimes he painted it upside down, suspended from a ladder. pouring color over the calligraphic outline, building the color, layers of color up from the black calligraphy. So it's a marriage of calligraphy and color in this pomophore technique that he developed. It's so innovative. I'll keep this up here. You can come up and see it. I'm sorry, I had a video of this, but I was not able to transfer it here. So I'm going to stop now, and I'd like to hear first some of you. What did you write down about the color blue? I have one more anecdote to tell you about the color blue, but we'll get to that after you. What sort of associations did you have with the color blue? Anybody want to read their list?
Too dark.
Hmm?
Too dark to see.
Too dark to see.
Yeah.
The list. Maybe we need some illumination. Can we have some lights? Can you turn on give us some more light in the room up above? Can you turn that up? Ah, there's lots of blue out there. I tried to dress for this, by the way. I'm wearing ultramarine.
I wrote down space, distance, freedom, light, pathos, and serenity.
Nice, beautiful. I like the serenity part. That's certainly common to the Caves of the Thousand Buddhas, the representation of the Buddha. Serenity is key in Buddhism. And it's also Mary, the cult of Mary. She's the bodhisattva, a Christian bodhisattva of compassion and mercy. And there is this promise of resurrection and serenity and end to suffering in human life, common to both of these religions. Anybody else want to read their list? Oh, please. Please.
Blue hours.
Blue
Hours.
hours.
I
Okay.
like
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. I like that.
the Matisse painting.
Yes.
Sky,
Sky,
ocean,
ocean.
rose.
Uh-huh.
Because I saw some blue rose, was so interesting. Yeah, so I looked
Wonderful.
at this. Blue music, I like blues.
Yes, I do too. Everybody likes the blues. Blue music, that's interesting because in ancient Rome, blue was not a very happy color. It was the color of misfortune. And it was the color of mourning, as in the blues. The blues is a kind of music of mourning, kind of blue, Miles Davis, the blues, a music of a very oppressed people, but through which they found a kind of transcendence, right? But in ancient Rome, blue was also the color of barbarians, the Celtic warriors that the Romans fought, colored themselves in blue. Maybe some of you saw the wonderful New York, the Blue Men. Remember the Blue Men? Well, the Celtics painted themselves blue, and the Romans thought, that's scary. But that changes. See how much color is informed by cultural construction, by language. That's really fascinating. That's that subjective dimension of color. It's so important in the history of color, in the history of painting. Anybody else care to read their? Yes.
I like blue.
You like?
I like blue.
Yeah.
That's blue to me is a blue green. Mystery. Blue usually used for like technology.
Technology.
Power.
Blue is also power.
If you wear a dress of blue, that is kind of image.
Of power.
You have a power.
Okay. I'll remember that the next job interview I go to.
Peace.
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 The UN. Think about the United Nations. Blue is the color of the United Nations.
Yeah. Blue meditation.
Meditation.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
yeah, mystery, blue
Yes.
mystery, depressed, yeah.
Depression.
Depression,
Mhm.
sad, fantasy, porcelain,
Ah, yeah, think about the color blue and the development of, think about the use of blue.
water, ocean, it's kind of a blue. Think about clean. Yeah, when you see blue, make you feel like this person is clean. You are not going to think about dirty things. Yeah, the
Blue movies, yes. I was waiting for someone to conjure that one up.
not very sexual feeling about not like the red orange usually have that. Yeah, it's very good. It's very good. Yeah, deal with God. Yeah.
So the divine.
Follow, yeah, that feeling.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyway, I think more like people should.
Oh, that's good. Anybody else? Thank you. Thank you. That's quite a list. That covers the gamut. But you might look at your lists and think about, how many of these things are that you've written down are the result of your background, your culture, your upbringing, your cultural history. How many of them are informed by that? How many of them are conceptual? How many of them actually have to do with something about the color? And the way we see blue, the many ways in which we see blue. There's something very ironic in the history of the color blue, and I'll end with this, which is that ultramarine, which was this fabulously ornate, beautiful color used in tapestries, rugs, costumes, became more valuable than gold in Europe. It really was more expensive. This dye, this pigment, that ends in the 19th century. It ends around the 1837 when the French government, a kind of commercial institute, because they were tired of paying so much money for aquamarine, this National Commercial Institute said, we will give an award, a big prize for any chemist or anyone who can create a synthetic aquamarine. So a man by the name of Jean-Baptiste Guimet developed what came to be known as French ultramarine at about 15,000 times less the cost of importing lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. And, that was the end of the use of, largely the end, except for a few painters like Turner, who continued to use lapis lazuli based ultramarine. Now, this man Guimet then started a factory to produce French ultramarine, mass produce it, made in millions of dollars, millions of francs. What did he do with that money? He founded the Musée Guimet, Paris, which is the largest museum of Asian art in Europe. And in that museum, guess what's there? Thousands of manuscripts that were stolen from the secret library of Dunhuang, Caves of the Thousand Buddhas, brought to France by Paul Pelliot, are in that museum. So, a little bit of transnational acculturation, appropriation, plunder, theft. But all of this is the Silk Road. It's the Silk Road, that color, that deep aquamarine, beautiful, ultramarine, not aquamarine, color that comes from this stone, this mineral stone, which has been used since the 4th millennium BC and has had such a powerful impact on all of our cultures and history. It's a fascinating story. Somebody should write a book about it, not me. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions or thoughts? Anybody wants to chime in here? Yes.
I just want to indicate that for Liz referencing concerning spiritual art.
Yes.
Students on color. Blue had a obviously Swiss resident sense. It had the ability to mitigate color conflict between color personalities. We have to remember that Liz thought that yellow was terribly offensive. Yes, and was associated with a dreadful shrill note as each color carried an audio aspect. Blue was a clear tone that was in the middle of everything. I think actually settled conflicts. So we have color conflict with the paint, or within a gallery that has various pieces. We have to look out for those fights. And we frequently see this is missed in modern interpretive process, in my opinion. We see good problems all the time.
Right.
And it's considered to be basically okay. But when there's a lot of blue, there's seasonal.
Well, you mentioned Swiss, what's the Swiss connection?
Well, no, it's Swiss in the sense of diplomatic, mediated process.
Yes, and most of the UN agencies are located in Geneva, but also the consulate in Geneva, like Geneva, and this was something that struck Jianhua Chen as well as the Romantic poets, Shelley, Byron, all of them who went there. They were struck by this deep blue color of La Plumb. And the serenity with that it evokes so many of the qualities. Peace to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Some of us, when we walk out of this gallery later this evening, will pick every single trace of blue. Thanks to you.
Good. I like that idea.
Oh, our artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you say something? Come over here. Yeah.
Okay.
This is the top. Yeah,
Okay, I can stand up, no problem. I think we had a wonderful speech explain his masterwork here. Okay, and especially focus on the blue. Traditionally in Western, even from Middle Eastern, from Egyptian, that time, long time ago, probably about 50,000 years ago, people already started using blue. But the only thing I want to tell you, the best quality of the rock can make that cobalt blue become ultramarine blue is the country today we call Iraq. Okay, so that was from there, but a long time ago, Iraq history, more than 50,000 years, longer than China, longer than Europe. It's directly associated with Africa. And actually, Iraq is the border between Middle East and Africa. That was a long time ago. So I think here, want to explain something really important about how we can deal with the blue. The blue, everybody knows, the largest space in our galaxy, it's all atmosphere. Only when the sun comes out, everything becomes blue. Otherwise, we call black, right? Even the black is not professionally correct word, just called dark. So opposite of the dark, those masters in old time, why they don't use direct sunlight? Because if you directly use sunlight, everything will become ultraviolet. So we don't want to see anybody on this planet. In order to see it, everybody, those masters, their work is more important to present it in front of the audience. That's why they use secondary power, which is the blue sky. So almost the king and the queen and the Messiah, Jesus, Maria, and so on, always associated with the blue background. And the painting before that painting, if you pay attention, was the English word is called E, because the sun is from east. Everybody uses that, but only master very carefully. No, the one before. More, turn over. More,
这是第一个 other direction, yes, I think so.
yeah.
Hmm?
No, no.
Sorry.
Yeah. 没有了呀，所有的呀。
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. You see the sky and the bottom, you squinting your eyes, but then you don't see the subject, only see blur of the form. That's an English word, capital letter E. Obviously, everybody knows the beginning of civilization by recording of our history in documents. Even go to Washington National Library, they will tell you the sun from east. Okay, that's why east means the biggest. And my question is very simple. I want everybody, because we are all living, how we can move on from the old master. We don't let the old master to tell us that's it. No more beyond. That's not true. All masters want you know, be positive. That's the reason. If an art piece not be positive, no artist should become an artist because there's no hope. So the blue has a much more meaning. That's why all masters in different generations last 1,000 years, from Botticelli all the way to Andy Warhol, all use blue. That's the reason. Simple, okay? And another thing I want to tell you everybody, this is not my show, this is my friend's show, but I want to adding on it. I'm adding on behind him, you know, how we be able to see the blue in the real life. And then in the real life, how can we transfer that blue as a symbol, as a symbolic meaning to be a power of eternity in our painting? That's what we're coming from today, all right? So I teach you one thing. I taught it by my teacher, it's not me. Okay, I learned that, just practice that. From now on, you started to see the color, you cannot look at that color more than 3 seconds. Because more than seconds, they become gray. No color. Color is the relationship between the earth and the sky. Some people say that between the hell and the heaven. That's religious. But for knowledge part, because the earth is built up by ashes in billions of years. The sunlight burning on the earth. That's why all the earth somehow are associated with warm color, which is orange. The opposite of orange is blue. That's how complementary colors start. Okay, so the only thing I want honestly to tell everybody, you don't have to study art for 30 years. You don't even need to study art for 3 days. 3 minutes, you become an artist. Do you know why? Because you know the color come from. The final thing I want to tell Webster Dictionary, they're missing one thing. They don't know how to translate the color of violet. Violet is a warm color. It's not cool color. And all the violet associated with ultramarine blue. Therefore, ultramarine blue is not cold blue. It's a warm blue because every blue has a reflection. So reflection is the opposite, the complementary color of its mother color, from its mother color. So therefore, you have to start to learn in 3 minutes how to be able to see the color. So now I say the last sentence. First thing is the horizon line, your eye. The center of the universe from your perspective. Everybody has its own perspective, is your nasal bone. That's how Da Vinci created a perspective. And then you have to start moving 3 circles, opposite as the needle of the clock. The clock is moving this way, all right? You move opposite way. That means changing your habit, changing your ability, knowledge, how other people teach you how to see the color. Most people learn the color from other people. They're not from nature. I want you to learn the color from nature. It's opposite. Opposite from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. Have to go through 12 hours. Before hit 12 again. This is 1 circle. Your eye in 3 seconds. And then another 3 seconds, you have to see vertically with the circle. Also opposite of the light, of the time needle. You go this way. You don't go that way. That way means go out. You want to bring in. Because whatever the color you see from this circle, that's your own color. Because the color has its own character. It's a regular, traditionally color is just only a knowledge about an indication of warm and cool. That's called color. But for psychologically, especially spiritually, the color can make you live longer. If you see your own color, makes you breathing in inside, and then the other circle is go that way. The whole 3 circle movement finished in 9 minutes, or in 9 seconds. In 9 seconds, you practice every day. You'll be able to see the color, and then you have no time. We call it dirty. Anything dirty, nothing dirty than your own mind. If you think your mind is pure, associated with the ultramarine blue, you're already not in the jail. Then you're already out. So you're a free man and free woman. And the last thing I want to tell you, if I don't marry my wife, she's Irish for more than 40 years, I don't know how important to respect a woman. That's all. That's why when I teach, I only teach you one thing. After you're learning with me for a while, I ask you one thing: who is your mother? If you don't know your mother, you never will become an artist. Just that simple. My speech is finished. Okay. This is the painting I did almost black white. It's my grandpa. I never saw him in my life. So, because my grandpa died 48 years old. My own father died 65 years old. Next year, I will become 70 years old. So I want this painting is only for my personal painting, for myself. I think my brother or my grandpa already know who he is. And that's me, that's a grandson. I don't want his money because he is a sailor working in American ship as a chef. So he doesn't have much money. But my father and my mother is very early generation, graduated from Japanese university, medical university. Very early, have a Shanghai Western hospital in Shanghai. So when the 1949, my parents donate the whole hospital to the government. And since that time, they have a lot of, we call a lot of money, is $40,000. So 40,000 Chinese yen. So basically, my teacher, they funded my teacher for me. So this is same guy with different expression. That's just the eye.
Wow.
I use the abstract technique. Why? What is called abstract technique? Everything associated with triangle. Every brush stroke is associated with triangle. So my painting basically is when you're really close to look at this small painting, it becomes photograph. And this large painting, if you walk 60 miles away, that's also a photograph. But when you're close to look, both paintings cannot put the same place to look. There's a different focus, like on a camera, has different focus. So this is 60 feet away. This is only, yeah. I just did it yesterday. And I put on my birthday on it, January 6th. That's it.
So much for sharing that with us. Thank you. Okay. Next, we are let's welcome the retired professor and art historian from Southeast State University, Professor Arthur Carl. Would you say a few words? Share your insight with us. Thank you. 告诉当心啊。We've got a track here, so yeah, be careful. Watch out your steps.
Welcome everyone, and I appreciate Mr. Morgan's exhibition, very successful. And today's topic, I don't know, to talk about color. Well, I'm a painter, but the Chinese, the major color is the black color, not blue. Yeah, blue, and blue is cold, brown, red is hot, so warm. So I think all colors are very important. And as a Chinese painter, black is the major color they use. Whether it's good or not, but for my topic today, I think we talk about Mr. Morgan's personal kind of artistic achievement, which is different from many other modern artists. As we know, modern artists started from the Impressionism. And that is because most important is East meet West. So when in China, in Japan, they all started to East meet West by adopting Western ideas and the expression realism. That is what the Asian artists want. In the Western art, started from the Impressionism, most important is to get the Chinese or Asian painting brush, dots, and lines, create a kind of abstract rhythm. And that is what is the most important. So we know that in the Western world, they started to adopt the Asian kind of arts, impressionism, dots, point, and lines, create a kind of rhythm that the Western classical painting did not want, didn't think about that. So Impressionism got it. But after that, there are a lot of different kind of directions. So here I picked up six different directions. But this will take about one semester for me to talk about. So here I just got the first one, Fauvist. Chinese called it 野兽派. That is like Matisse use Chinese brush kind of lines, calligraphic lines, and paint color dots to express animals, trees, or human figures. So that is the very important kind of steps. So simply the next one, expressionism, like a Rouault and Monk, using more kind of free ripples, the kind of lines, ripples, lines for figures. Then the next one, abstract expressionism, Kandinsky. He was born in Russia, and he got into contact with the Chinese painting. So he used real Chinese kind of brush to paint, use the lines to paint abstract paintings, abstract expression. The next development is dramatic expressionism. The major artists, Pollock and Foreman, Miro, painting with dropping kind of dots, and then add some lines. So the abstract expression is very dramatic. Okay, and then something were different, using the kind of large blocks of colors, geometrics, but create using the change of color to create a kind of mysterious feeling, mysterious kind of contents. Some scholars said there's a philosophy of Zen Buddhism. So that's just not use the Chinese brush lines, but try to get the Chinese kind of religious contents. Well, the next one is abstract formalism. That is, what is abstract formalism? Use a geometric hard edge to create a kind of geometric kind of structures, like a square, red, and triangles to create a kind of composition. Well, that is, we know what is it. Well, the next thing, the last questions. What Mr. Morgan create a kind of different styles? What? Not the brush line, not the dots, not drifting, but use some inspiration of Chinese painter Zhang Daichen spreading color, but not ink. Use Western media. The canvas and acrylic colors, not Chinese ink and simple watercolor. So create a kind of new styles. Another very important is the free flow color, creating a kind of ethereal flow with the wisdom and implication of cosmic atmosphere. So when you look at Mr. Morgan's painting, it's not just like a dropped touch, but with implication of cosmic rhythm, cosmic kind of songs or kind of inspiration of sounds. So that's the what we see Mr. Morgan's new development, and also some implication of landscape. What? That's the other artists did not really do it. So we can see the kind of mysterious atmosphere, mysterious landscape, and the sort of cosmic rhythm. Okay, so I just simply give this this my understanding. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Xu, would you say?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for Professor Carl. Thank you for Carl and Ning. Yeah, Professor Carl published many Chinese painting history book. One of the most impressive discovery in his book was why in the 13th century the liberal painting or Inca painting we call the Wenlenhua burst in the China. The Professor Carl said the reason is why the Muslim power rose up in the Central Asia, and the Silk Way in the land was cut off, and the important pigments like lazuli, cannot come from East Asia or Middle Asia to the China. Yeah, you know, in Tang Dynasty and the Song Dynasty, there are so much mineral pigments in the painting. But in the Song Dynasty, after the 12th and the 13th century, we can see little and little. So the material supply is vital important. As I know, in 15 years ago, when Professor Sun Jiaqing, the last Zhang Daqian's disciples, came to my gallery in Santa Clara as a show. One day we're talking about, and I asked the pigments, Zhang Daqian used in Badeyuan, and the Professor Sun said, around in 1963, one day, Zhang Daqian's agent in New York, Frank Carroll, he is the manager of C.T. Lu's gallery, and told Zhang Daqian, said, "Oh, master, I found you are to spend so much money in the pigments like lazuli from Asia, Japan, China, very expensive. Right now in US, there is kind of new color, very lucid, very cheap, and as good as the lazuli." And he gets some for Zhang Daqian. So Zhang Daqian tried the acrylic color, especially in blue, in 1963.
Do you know which painting?
Oh, today we have many paintings just to see that. Yeah, we can double check if the color immersed, sinked into the paper or the silk is acrylic. Yeah, very easy. Yeah, if use lazuli, it's always on the top of. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the. I want to share some photo with you. Yeah. Okay.
哇塞，是这个吗？哎，
Same. 下面。
哦，下面，哦，
Yeah.
这个机子有点问题啊。
能动吗？在同一个 PPT 里面吗？对，在同一个 PPT。
爸爸这个会发。Okay. Yeah, today we have a big event on 50th City in the opposite gallery, Mirror Gallery and the City Hall Square. It's a project named The Invisible Sky. I think there were over 2,000 people in the sky tonight. Yeah, they have a special umbrella show. Yeah, led by American artist Elizabeth Tucker. Yeah.
这电脑老出问题。
No problem. Yeah. Okay, forget it. Yeah. So if you want to stay here for another 30 minutes, you can join that event. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. And thank you for Jamie. Do you say a couple of words?
Yeah. Okay.
Nothing other than thank you for the opportunity of showing here in this great space. And for those people that have come, I appreciate it. And the people who spoke on my behalf, I'm very grateful to. Thank you for the professor's words. I'm sad the exhibition coming to an end. It's been a wonderful experience. And hopefully we'll be back here again sometime before too long. And I just hope that this show is interesting to people to think, for the reasons I hope, to think about the idea of how art can communicate at a time when we need to be communicating better with each other than we are. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah.